not even on
Oh,
Zoom.
we were going to do it online.
Oh, that's right.
Well, we were going to have everyone in it, and then we decided the others had no opinions to give. So.
Oh, it's because we still needed to make zines. So we're like, if we're coming in person anyway.
In person and we'll have some fun.
That's a much more, nicer
That
way
was
of putting it.
last month, obviously, for those listening along. We made those zines last month.
None of this is going in the episode.
I don't trust you anymore because I say things and it goes in the episode. All right, we ready?
Yeah.
3, 2, 1. Welcome back to Amy Ann. I'm Amy Matthews and I'm here today with Abby Guy,
Hi.
Justina Ashman,
Hi.
and Payton Hogan.
Hi.
And my cat Zoe, who has joined us on the couch today, who may have some things to say about Smut Month now that she is a teenager. So we've been doing Smut Month this month, and our book of the month is, which I forgot to bring out, but is Morning Glory Milking Farm, which I always want to call Minotaur Milking Farm.
Same thing.
Which we'll be reading for our book of the month, and everyone I think has the same reaction to it, because anyone who's ever talked about this book to me says, oh, it's actually really good. Like I started it and I couldn't stop, because I think everyone thinks it's a bit of a joke book, the monster smut thing, but actually they're often really good reads. Mm-hmm. So we're going to be talking about Katherine Angel today, but before we dive in, I want to acknowledge that we're meeting on Kaurna land today, beautiful Kaurna Yata. It's a sunny, beautiful day here on Kaurna country. And I want to pay my respects to elders past and present, and to extend those respects to any First Nations people who are listening to us today. All right, so segue there into Katherine Angel, who I read this book a while ago. We had a colleague, Georgia Nichols, who we had on last year to talk about, I think she was on Smut Month last year, who did her PhD on kind of representations of sex in rom-coms. And I read this along with her last year, and I've never forgotten it. I keep going back to it, and it's highlighted all the way through. I've got so many notes on it. So I thought it was a good one to set for Smut Month, just to start talking about some of the complexities of sex. Because we make a lot of jokes about romance and erotica and smut, and whether we're smut girlies or not in the romance community. But actually, sex is a really political, complex issue. And so Katherine is an academic who has a PhD in psychiatry and sexuality from Cambridge University. She's written a few books around women and desire. So she wrote Unmastered, a book on desire most difficult to tell. And she wrote a book called Daddy Issues. This book, Tomorrow Sex Will Be Good Again, the title actually comes from a Foucault quote. We all love Foucault.
A quote.
Yeah.
Quote. That's the level of my contributions for today.
You can leave now.
And the quote comes from 1976's The Will to Knowledge. So Foucault writes a lot about power. So this is really diving into some things around consent, vulnerability and desire, and the kind of intricacies of power maybe.
Yeah, and the flaws in the current conversations around consent culture, how it emerged, the ways that it's flawed.
Because I grew up, obviously I came up, I guess it was like third wave post-feminist era, and consent was such a big thing. Bless you, Abby.
Thanks. I apologise in advance to whoever has to edit this episode.
Why do you sound drunk?
Zoe's decided to start hunting birds as well, so it's underneath Justina, preparing to attack the window, which is also good.
I also think my stomach is going to rumble, so I don't know if the microphone will pick that up, but this is your warning to ignore it, please.
From experience, it doesn't pick it up.
I'm going to be perfect, so I don't know about you guys.
There's always one. So consent culture, this idea, when I was starting out in romance, there was, and we're going to be talking to Amy Andrews about sex as well, and I have heard her talk about this before too, around the way romance authors have wrestled with how to show consent on the page, that it became a really big thing when I was coming up about how you should show joyful, willing, enthusiastic kind of consent.
Yeah.
So have you guys felt that you've had those messaging growing up, that women should be vocal about their consent?
I definitely think there was a whole spate of consent education that was trying to talk about consent not just as you're not hearing a no, but as you are getting an enthusiastic yes.
Yeah.
Which I think is a really great message for people to get. But I do, after having talked to you guys as well, there is so much more happening when you're talking about consent than just a yes or a no.
Feels like a
ever see that?
post-Me Too movement.
Yeah. Did you see
Yes.
the tea? There was that tea video that went around or on social media, the memes about pretend it's a cup of tea. Would you like a cup of tea? Yes, I would.
Oh,
No, I
yeah.
wouldn't. And you withdraw consent. And
I kind of hated
the
those because
analogy.
I'm like, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Yeah, who says yes to tea and then halfway through sipping the tea goes, no, I don't want this anymore.
Also, it's like your tea is not like your body where you live.
Yeah.
But I think that illustrates it, right? Like
Yeah.
every metaphor people try to use for consent, it's like, well, no, no. And that's what Katherine Angel's getting into, right? Is this idea. So she says how we understand sex is inextricable from how we understand what it is to be a person. We cannot deny that we're flexible social creatures, constantly ingesting, incorporating, and reformulating what we take in. I don't believe that we can ever leave power behind when sex, and then we can enter a zone blissfully free of inequality. And tea doesn't suggest inequality or power differentials.
Yeah, that's so true. And in fact, if anything, the tea thing is like you get to just try the tea without knowing if you like it or not.
That's right. It's not a violation to drink the tea.
Yeah.
It's not violent.
Yes. The other thing that always strikes me in terms of representations of consent in romance novels is the emphasis on verbal. Because in my experience, like I grew up as a young teenager reading so much romance fiction, and then I was Me Too 2016?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
after
so that's when I
Donald
was
Trump.
18. And so that's kind of when all of this emerged. I never really, and I could be wrong here, I never really saw issues in most of the romance novels that I was reading that I would feel the need to correct with verbal consent in those scenes, because, and one of the things that really like blew my mind that we'll get into more with Katherine Angel is one of the issues with consent is just the emphasis that we put on it at the detriment of bad sex more broadly and of men's role in making sex good or bad and just how good sex comes from respecting each other, really.
But also sex, like representations of sex are always a kind of fantastical thing, right?
Yeah.
Like the way it's represented in film and television and even pornography, it's like everyone knows what the moves are. It's like orchestrated and choreographed, whereas in real life it's awkward and weird and funny and like it's just not like that. It's like expecting to dance the way they do in Bridgerton, that you'll just get up and know the steps and it will be orchestrated, and it's like it doesn't work that way.
In High School Musical, when they all know the songs, am I right, Ali?
When they sing
She loves musicals.
when they sing and dance
I was
about how
like,
you can't sing and dance.
I feel like in the romance book itself as well, when you're talking about like not noticing any like pre-consent having to be verbal, because you're also inside the heroine's head.
Yes.
So a lot of the consent is internalized, whereas the verbal kind of, I guess the push for it is that he also should be aware verbally.
Which makes me think, like, not that you shouldn't ever write consent into books, I definitely don't want to imply that, that's what I mean, but are we taking it to mean that every single romance novel should be teaching you the right way to do sex, and therefore they should all have explicit verbal conversations around?
Yeah, because they're not necessarily a guidebook.
No.
Right?
Yeah, and I think it's complicated because it's like I think that they can impact, like the ways we read about sex can impact people's attitudes about sex, but at the same time there's almost this like old-timey misogyny in the idea that women should read novels to better themselves and instruct themselves, and any other purpose is like bad. So it's like, yeah, no, I don't think the impetus should be on romance to be providing, like being educative.
Yeah.
The other thing, I'm skipping ahead again, but regardless of how sex or relationships are portrayed in a romance novel, I think what is so powerful about them is that they're just unabashed eroticism and sexuality, and that is something that women traditionally either haven't had permission to have, or their sexuality has been denied, or it's been, I don't know, it's supposed to be a very particular way, your sexuality, whether that's the post-feminist hypersexual almost and like super powerful and super knowing yourself, all that kind of stuff.
But it was so performative too, that era. Like it, comes back to the thing Angel's talking about of like this impetus being put on women to know themselves, like straight het women, obviously, that you should constantly know yourself and your desires so well, which is such a big burden, right?
Yeah.
But, and you know, like if you think about the post-feminist era, like the raunch era and the performativity, and how much of that is deeply conscious and chosen, right? And how much of it is part of your ecosystem that you're not even examining.
You know what it reminds me of is because I would do this, like if you're a kid and you're getting bullied for certain aspects of yourself, you start making a joke out of them and you make the joke first so that other people don't get a chance to. This kind of reminds me of that. It's like you're going to hypersexualize and objectify yourself so that other people don't do it first, which isn't actually liberating at all, and it's not really addressing the overarching issue of misogyny.
I think all of this exists on a spectrum though, right? Like, and I think there's almost just a pattern of people wanting to have the neat answer and the neat solution when it's just not neat. Like for some people, it might be super liberating and it might be a reclaiming of agency. And for a lot of others, it isn't. And some people might find it like liberating and then change their minds and stop finding it liberating. And it's kind of like what you were talking about, women not having permission to not know themselves. It's like, no, you have to be performing your sexuality in the perfect way. You can't try stuff and then be like, oh, actually, no, that was
And
no
once
good.
we get into sex, like what I like about this book is she's really talking about the burden of not just knowing yourself and policing yourself, but policing others. Like that the whole sexual experience, that women have some kind of control over it, like that it's all about control, which is really exhausting.
Yeah, she talks about how we've put too much burden on consent in general and that it's trying to carry a weight it can't hold.
Yeah, I think I've got some quotes here. So she talks about consent culture. So she says, in recent years, 2 requirements have emerged for good sex: consent and self-knowledge. And she quotes some like popular news headlines. So she talks about BBC and Teen Vogue and talking about, you know, a message that have the conversation before you enter the bedroom. And it's just like, but sometimes you don't know that you're feeling like getting frisky. Do you know, like it's not like you're sitting down, and this is where I think a lot of the kickback comes to consent culture. You know, you hear a lot of dog whistling around, oh, what I'm going to do is stop in the middle and ask, do you want it? And she says yes. You know, there's a lot of that kind of narrative. And it's like, well, maybe, yes, sometimes absolutely you should do that. But then maybe sometimes it'll be, like you said, Justina, a lot messier than that. And maybe people change their minds and maybe they're not entirely sure. Maybe you're like 35% sure that you might like this person and want to go further, or 75% sure, but you might not be 100% sure.
And I think it becomes complicated when you have also people who are, you have to assume that people are coming to this with absolutely no knowledge about what consent is. If you're, you know, doing a consent education like program or drive, but it's not always simple. And so, you know, you can say, oh, have this conversation before you even get to the bedroom. But as you say, that's not sometimes how it works out. But if you have a really rigid idea of what consent looks like, then you're actually, I feel like, not equipped to recognize when it's being withdrawn or when it isn't there. Because in your mind, okay, we had a talk outside before we got to the bedroom, that means it's all good. But there's no,
then it's like, I didn't give you permission to do that thing. I don't want to do that thing. I want to stop now.
And it's like, if you get so rigid about this is exactly what it looks like, then it just leaves more room for people to not recognize when it's not being given.
Because the opposite side of that is like attunement to someone. Is actually paying attention to micro body language, pleasure. Because probably to clarify what we're talking about, like there's rape and sexual assault, and then there's messy sex, and then there's like good sex, bad sex, all the different kinds of sex. And obviously rape and sexual assault, absolutely not. Like there are no, like there's just no place for that at all. But when we get into like this idea that women are responsible 100% for the sex act being consensual, that seems deeply unfair.
Yeah, it's the you didn't say no or you didn't say yes.
Yeah.
Enthusiastically
or you
enough,
said yes
or you
weirdly, or I didn't really understand what kind of yes you were saying. Or
And I think it's just very telling that the focus is entirely on women. There's really no equivalent for any of this for men. Like we don't demand that they know themselves or anything like that. What's so sad about it is that at the heart of it is, I think women just want to be noticed during sex. And I think it's so easy for men to be entirely in their own heads and focused on their own pleasure, which is why one of the things that I put on this run sheet, which won't be very current news to anyone now,
Oh, yeah, I like this. I know what you're about to say.
Very recent, well, this year, good old clavicular.
I can't believe that that's the name. That
I
you
know.
chose.
What's his real name? Is it Braden?
I couldn't tell you.
Yeah. It just seems like a Braden to me. I don't know what that means.
What does that say about Braden?
Sorry, Bradens.
I'm getting Braden.
And there's some poor guy who was born clavicular. He's like, hey.
That onus is on the parents.
Whoever that is, they're having a rough life, I think, probably. So Clavicular recently said that he doesn't feel the need to bring women he has sex with to orgasm because, in his words, it's poor ROI, which is return on investment, as in it takes too long and requires too much effort.
Oh my God, he
and
must
won't
he's
recoup
telling
that
on himself.
expense.
I was about
that,
to say,
no?
it's
Yeah.
like he must be quick. You're like, what?
Yeah, kind of like
He's like, I'm in
genuinely
and out.
feels
Like,
I'm done.
yeah.
I don't have time.
I've got to go mog.
There's so many like layers to that though.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like, ROI, what are you talking about?
I know.
This
like,
is a person, not an investment.
And it's so self-centered because I guess for you, maybe there is no ROI except that you are making it good for the person that you are having sex with and therefore for the both of you.
but then if you're not,
Oh, yeah,
if it's not
maybe
like
you-
I mean, I've always felt like this. Sorry, this is going to be graphic. I'm just going to warn you now. You know, like if you're
smut
not,
month.
if it's not like both of you having sex together, you're basically just masturbating into a body.
Yes.
Like that's not sex.
well, this is like surely the ROI, which I don't know, is that you care about the other person and their happiness.
Yeah.
But
That seems radical.
but I
When you
also
meet
think
this guy.
But I also think, almost going back to something you said a little bit earlier, there is also as much as there's a societal onus on women to be, the arbiters of consent, but there's also a patriarchal idea that for men, it's always a yes, no matter what, which I think is a
which
problem.
is also awful to men
Like-
because there's a range of male sexuality too. Like we
Yeah.
have, and this is actually where clavicular is a great example because it buys into a hierarchy of masculinity and a certain kind of behavior we talked about this when we talked about the Omegaverse too, like alpha, right? Which is bullshit. Actually, men have as huge a range of sexuality as women and other people too, and not all men are like immediately in and
it's
yes.
like if you're thinking
Yeah.
of getting your partner off as is a chore, do you want to be there? That's like, but I don't know
Yeah.
if like are men being given are men thinking about this of like actually what does consent look like on my end as well? Or
I think, she has a really nice bit later in the section on vulnerability, actually around male desire, where she talks about how violence in pornography, which you see is like always been there and seems worse than ever, that it displaces heterosexual male vulnerability, that the vulnerability men experience in feeling desire for a woman. And I think you see that in clavicular, how do you say it? Clavicular? And all the other
Just give it a sneeze and you'll find it.
Braden. You see Braden's absolute terror of vulnerability. Like
Yeah.
and of being vulnerable to a woman as well. And I think
Totally.
so I think there is so much to say about the male experience of this stuff.
I think about this when I'm reading romance novels because so much of the onus is on women to do the consenting. In the romance novel, it's also always assumed. I know it's a fantasy space, so you kind of you will assume anyway that he is into it, but it's always assumed that she is withholding and he is always willing to give. So he's just waiting for her to give the the green light, the go ahead.
You're right, though, that it is a fantasy space, but it's a shame that you don't see that ever in the fantasy. Is more of a, like, his negotiation of his wants and desires. And an interesting story that I have, there's this guy that I know who he's very open. Well, this is going back a while, but he was always very open about all of his sex stories. And so eventually I started to notice this pattern where all of the negative sex stories were about women that he just didn't seem to really like, but he had sex with them anyway. His whole thing was that he will just go for it on any date with any woman. He sort of expects that, not from her, but he just sort of expects that sex will happen and he will do it, even if for the entire date he has not experienced an ounce of attraction to her. And I would always get so annoyed because the stories, Millie off camera is like, what? And, yeah.
in my mind.
This was terrible for me to hear because I know that everyone is different, but I'm like, I just can't imagine bringing myself to do it physically if I wasn't experiencing attraction.
But it means something different, right?
Yes.
That's partly because the risk is different, the vulnerability is different, the judgment of you, because I think that generations of men, you know, you can see it even in romance with the rake or the whatever, we kind of applaud men and expect them to sleep with as many women as possible like they're a dog in rut, right? Like that's the kind of form of masculinity. Whereas if you do it, the risk is higher, the judgment is higher.
Yeah.
It's a whole different thing.
And it blew my mind because he's generally a very self-aware person, but there was no self-awareness here, obviously, because he didn't seem to realize that all of the negative stories would be about, I'm not going to go into too much detail, but it would be just things that she did that really annoyed him and he like could not let it go. He'd be like, oh, and she did this.
He
and
got
like
the ick.
Yeah, he would get the ick and I'd be like, maybe it's because you weren't attracted to her.
Yeah,
but
maybe don't sleep with her.
Yeah, I bet if another woman who you were attracted to did all of these things that you find so pesky and annoying, if she did all of those things, it would not even figure into part of the story. You wouldn't be focused on it. You wouldn't care. It wouldn't have ruined your whole experience because you actually wanted to be with that person.
I actually think that's an important thing that romance does, right? When romance has sex scenes, the characters love each other.
Yeah.
Like the emotional connection of the characters is as important to the like eroticism of the sex scene as the sex itself.
And I was thinking about this with like, you know, there's so few good rom-coms on film and TV, right? And when you find a good one, part of what you like about it is they're enjoying each other.
Yeah.
Like they can just be doing nothing, like lying around in bed, sitting around together. You get this sense of enjoyment. And I think that you're right, romance does that when it's doing it really well. That the eroticism isn't just the sex act, it's all the interactions around it.
Even with rivals to lovers, when they're having sex, they're still enjoying parts about it.
Yeah, yeah.
Just
Yes.
thinking about that. 'Cause
Yeah.
it's such a big trope in romance. That's all.
I
Love
kept
rivals to
thinking
lovers.
of bell hooks while you were talking too, because, you know, in The Will to Change, there's a lot about how we deform male sexuality and male desire and male vulnerability, how we don't let het men be vulnerable and we don't let them, you know, like it's pretty uncool for a lot of guys to say, actually, I don't really like sex except with someone I feel really safe with, or, you know, I actually feel pretty uncomfortable about a lot of these things, or I don't like that. Like we don't let men say I don't like that without kind of emasculating them.
You have to be so blasé about it all the time. Like, yeah, I might have sex with her at the end of this day. I'll just see if I enjoy it.
Well,
So
is that
sad.
also because they've been raised with the expectation that
Yeah.
they should be good to go whenever?
Yes.
Yeah, it's something that they should just intrinsically want all the time.
Just because physically you can get there doesn't mean you have to do it. I just need you to know.
But also then you've got the focus on like, this leads us to our book of the month, but like Viagra, like there are all these ways men make their bodies get there when their bodies don't feel like getting there too.
Yes.
Like this absolute focus on you need to be at it all the time. There's another really good quote here around that with masculinity. She says, this may be why desire, a troubling symbol of the loss of control, gets refigured so insistently as triumph over the woman, as denigration of her, as humiliation of her. These are ideals of mastery and power in which men punish women, but also themselves. And that's kind of bell hooks' point too, that it's a double-edged sword.
Yeah, the patriarchy. It has everyone.
Bloody patriarchy.
Well, this is, I want to say we're talking a lot about like heterosexual relationships and sex, but I do think that like these patriarchal ideas around sex and gender and power don't stop existing as soon as you're in a queer context. If anything, there are just different harmful stereotypes that start to emerge, like things like the idea of the predatory lesbian.
Yeah.
Because the idea of desiring women becomes masculine, becomes, but you know, it starts to, these are like stereotypes that are built from these like patriarchal ideas around gender.
100%, because I think,
Yeah.
you can see that also replicated in queer romance often too.
Yeah.
Like the predatory masculinity, this like masculinity associated with wanting sex all the time.
Yeah.
sorry about my language, but fucking everything all the time, like being good to go all the time, and femininity having to, whether it's like, you know, queer male femininity, lesbians, you know, whatever it is femininity is equated with needing to be coaxed and coerced and like giving consent.
I even feel
Amy, you can say fucking on this podcast.
Yeah,
We've said
we
worse.
do it a lot. I think
We
I've done
talked
worse than
about
that.
omnipositors last
I think
week.
it's just because
Ovipositors,
can I tell you, I
whatever
think it's just because the cat's here.
Oh,
bad.
She's a teenager.
She's just been a
asleep.
baby.
She needs parental
You're like, I can't say
guidance.
fucking and have my
Sorry,
kid.
I'm sorry, just have her ears.
Fair enough. I retract my statement. We will be polite for polite ears.
I feel this way even with the emphasis on top and bottom as well.
Yeah.
It's the need to categorize every single thing.
According to penetration.
Yes. I remember even once going to a party and this was all queer people, and I think a lot of them were just quite young. Like they were very early 20s. They were 19 and into their early 20s. And they had everyone do I think it's called the rice purity test.
What is
Yeah.
this?
What is
I'm
this?
old. What is this?
So this is to see how pure of mind you are. But it's
You wash you like rice and then see how much starch comes out.
Yeah.
It's like one of
Yes.
those. It's like one of those online quizzes.
yes,
Yeah.
everyone let us know what your results are in the comments.
Okay, you
don't
need to
wanna know.
I want to know more about this. What do you do with
So
the rice?
It's like a
There's no
personality
rice.
quiz.
That's just what they
No.
call it. Amy.
okay, thank
I
God,
think
because
that's
my
an
mind is
acronym
going
for
places.
something, but I don't know. But yeah, no.
You
it's just
present
like
someone
yes,
with rice
no.
and you go, "What are you going to do to this rice?"
Yeah,
and that's
yeah.
how you tell how pure they are.
How many grains?
Yeah.
I think you just
And they go,
rate-
"I'm going to cook it," and you go, "Pure."
do you want white rice, brown rice, quinoa? What do you want?
I think
Okay.
you just rate your level of interest in a whole
Bunch of
list
different
of
things.
different things.
Yeah.
Why is
Yeah.
it called the rice test?
I think it's just an acronym for something, to be honest.
Right. Okay, that makes more sense.
Personality quizzes piss me off anyway because they binary everything into like yes or no or very interested or not very interested.
My problem with them is I can always tell what direction they're coaxing me in with the
Yes.
answers. I'm like, if I answer this way, this is what you're going to say.
Now
No,
I'm going
are
to
you looking
curate
up-
my answers.
Yeah.
to
Look
the
up the
result that I
test
want.
now, Abby, because I want to know the questions.
It's because it was first done at Rice University.
Oh, it's named
In
after
Texas.
a
Oh,
you have university
So
for
it's
that
totally
now?
academic then.
Right.
Yeah.
Period.
I want to know some of these
Rice
questions.
purity.
I want Abby to-
I'm
you
pulling
can
it up
ask
now,
it.
and
Ask it.
I'll get some of the
'Cause
questions.
Payton loves these binary questions.
I love
It has its
so
own
much.
website.
Amazing.
I feel this way about the Myers-Briggs quiz as well. I'm like,
Oh,
these
yeah.
questions are so dumb.
Okay, it's pretty much just asking things that you have done.
Oh, right.
And so your purity is based on what level of
well,
things
we
you've
don't
done.
have to
So it
answer
starts
that.
with,
We don't have to
starts
answer
with
it, but
like
let's hear it.
holding hands romantically.
Wait a second.
And then it gets to like threesomes and orgies and stuff like that.
They did this at a university, but this is just like Dolly, right? Like
Yeah,
Dolly
yeah,
magazine,
yeah.
isn't it? And then you add up all your scores and what number you're going to do.
Yes. But I just found it so interesting at this party that people, it was a joke, but they were also taking it seriously. Like if you got a low score, or they would look at your results and they'd be like, oh, you're a submissive. Oh, I love that for you. That's so cute. I feel like this is so, like that quiz does not actually tell you anything about the person. Do you know that?
Also, it's that
doesn't.
desire to make everything an identity that I feel like we're hopefully coming out of now. But there was this like boxing up of every little thing as
This
being
would've
your
been right in the
identity.
thick of that.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And a resistance to the idea that things can be like fluid and shifting and changing and
Yes.
complex. And
Again, the problem that Katherine Angel talks about is you have to be vulnerable and feel safe enough to experiment and try things. That's actually how you have good sex and learn what you like. It's not by doing a quiz or, ruminating on what would I be interested in when you're completely out of the context of sex. That doesn't really
Her
work.
opening story is really good too, like where she talks about the porno actor.
That's
James
I love
Dean
that part.
and Girl X. And he did that kind of competition thing where he was like, do a scene with James Dean. So this was 2017. And it was a contest and this Girl X won the contest and you got to be filmed having sex with him. But also they could turn off the camera when they wanted, so you didn't have to film the whole thing. And you get to watch her on screen kind of going back and forth and she's kind of nervous and she's not sure if she wants to do it. And he's like, oh, we'll only do it if you want to. And she does end up going through it with the camera off, but you get to see the whole play of like her feelings and her thoughts. And that was, I thought, a really interesting anecdote. Because like
Also
you're
just the
saying,
way it's
submissive,
written.
you might be submissive
it's
this
written so
minute
well.
and not the next minute.
Yes.
You know?
It's almost
It's
like you're
also
not either
different
a
partner
top
to
or a
partner,
bottom.
right?
or whatever. or a dom or a sub.
Yeah. I was just saying that I think it's also different partner to partner. Like, yeah.
And also, like, if you're with a partner for a long time, you're gonna change as a human being.
Every time you have sex is kind of like the first time in a way. It's going to be different every time.
In like romance novels, I think it's worth pointing out that romance readers might like reading about sex that's not the kind of sex that they want to actually have. So another way in which just ruminating isn't going to tell you.
Really? You mean like when I read about vampires, I don't want to get my neck sucked on? Really?
I've been saving myself for an Edward Cullen.
Right.
At the same time,
He doesn't exist.
And I am going to learn about Edward Cullen this year.
Our virginal vampire boyfriend.
But also, like, the characters in the sex scene, like in romance novels, it's like I think the best sex scenes in romance novels are when it's specific to those characters and to their relationship. So it's completely removing the like person from the act of sex. I feel like is not giving you an accurate idea of how anything works.
No, it's that idea, because that's what you were talking about with that guy you knew, that you could sub anyone out. It's just like, well, that's not, I mean, that's like having it's like if I could sub you out in this conversation, I'm not having a conversation with Payton, and am I? I'm just talking to myself.
And God, we wish we
Payton
could sub
AI.
Payton out.
I love what you said about how approaching sex that way, you're just masturbating into a body. That I think, not to make a huge generalization, but I do think a lot of men treat sex that way. And I think part of it is this sad thing where they're so overcome probably by the pressure to have sex anyway that they have to think of it that way, or like,
And it's a conquest.
It's
a conquest, basically.
This is making me think of the movie Bottoms, which is
I love that film.
Such a good
which
movie.
I love, just because it's like you get those like grody teen boy films, which is like, I'm 16 and I'm still a virgin, and then they do hijinks to try and have sex. But this like subverts it by having like grody teen lesbians do that instead, and it's so much fun. But also it's like, it becomes the like, you know, the differences of how sex is treated in like a teen comedy, but like boys versus teen girls is like, oh, it's shameful versus, oh, it's shameful that you haven't versus it's shameful that you have. Yeah.
We don't have time to get into this today, but maybe when we talk Twilight, I would love to talk about the myth of virginity. Like, that's such a great topic.
I love that you connected that to Twilight.
Yes.
Yeah. You're so right.
It's a lot of virginity.
There's so much to talk about in that.
So the second bit of the book moves on from consent to desire, and Payton's written some amazing questions. I'm going to credit you with those.
But you read them.
I will read them. So one of them is on the importance of seeing women as desiring machines. Would you say that the romance novel itself is an artifact of sexual desire?
Because I was thinking yes. I feel like that's what's so powerful about it, is because Katherine Angel spends a lot of time going through how women's sexuality has been thought about across centuries, and how it goes to being super hyper medicalized. You know, there just seems to be always something wrong with the woman, no matter what her experience is. But largely what's happening now is like in the DSM-5, a desexualization of women. Like, what was it? They rename a certain, you know, scare quotes, disorder to something else. It turns desire and arousal into something cognitive, is what she was saying, rather than something libidinal and bodily. And I feel like, and the emphasis on responsive desire was the other thing she was talking about.
Yeah.
Not that there is a problem, you shouldn't throw the baby out with the bathwater, but one of the issues surrounding the idea of responsive desire, which is that you don't spontaneously feel aroused, you feel aroused and desirous in response to
because I
some
think
sort of stimuli.
sexuality has always been defined on a very patriarchal male model, right? That, you know, man sees woman, penis gets erect, like that is like basically normal. And then the way we experience it, anyone else in the world who is not that one specific man is abnormal, right? But actually, there's a lot of studies that talk about other sexualities needing, like, it's a slower process. It's not like you just jump in and bang.
The point about libido is interesting, because I think it's, again, where gender essentialism ruins the party once again. If the idea of having a libido is so tied to the idea of masculinity, and having an active libido means you're doing masculinity even better.
Yeah, you're winning at masculinity.
Then because there's this like patriarchal idea of like opposite genders, that removes the idea that women have any libido at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if they have a libido, then that's
Whereas
concerning.
Some
it's masculine.
do, some don't.
Yeah.
You know, like
but
we're
that's
all different.
one of the issues we get into when we overemphasize responsive desire or responsive arousal, responsive sexuality, is that it's as if a woman would never consider sex until she's in a sexual situation.
Which, as we know, with the rise in very smutty books, is not true.
Exactly. So that's why I'm thinking it's cool to think about the romance novel as an artifact of desire. It's like proof. Like, this is desire. This is interesting. This isn't, you waiting completely unsexually for someone to come and try and provoke you.
Press a button.
You are thinking about it. You are desiring it. It's not happening, but you are thinking about it and wanting it even when it's not happening.
So what I like about that is thinking about people as their own complete universe, right? That your desire is your desire. So the sex act, when 2-3 more people meet up, is a relationship or an interaction, right? And what you're describing is almost the difference between conversation and thought, right? So if I can't sub you out because we're having a conversation right now, but I can also sit with my own thoughts and have some really great thoughts about this book. And I feel like desire is not necessarily something that has to interact with another human being. Like you can sit with your desire and it's yours, and it can be a very rich inner life. And then sex is something else. Like sex is where desire meets another human and you create something else.
That's so true. And that's a really great lens to look at really taboo fantasies through.
Because because that's what you were saying too, Justina, about you might not want to do everything you're reading. That might be your inner thoughts, and not everything has to be said aloud.
On that topic of people aren't always like actually wanting to experience the types of desire and sex they read about in books. I think that's something just a little bit condescending to think that romance readers just can't tell.
Oh, I know.
If someone's being like toxic or doing something violent. I don't know. It's like they know.
Yeah.
It's part of the fantasy.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that's what I love about Katherine Angel too, is it's not black and white and it doesn't have to be. Do you know, like you don't have to be like, I want this dragon lord who's a really rapey dude to have to account for patriarchal masculinity. Like I'm just having a fantasy about a guy with wings. Like let's just let that be.
Even I find that in queer romance as well, sometimes I feel like there's too much of an onus on it to be super wholesome. Yeah. And I was like, I can also like reading about people who are really toxically obsessed with each other in a way that's not healthy.
Break out the letters.
Especially with sapphic ones.
Yeah.
Right?
I was like, it doesn't always have to be nice. I mean, that stuff is good. There's nothing wrong with it. But it's like, where's the room to explore the darker sides of the desire? Which doesn't necessarily mean that you want to live that.
No, yeah. I mean, and that's the joy of fantasy. And again, then that's the difference between the inner world and then what you practice in the bedroom. And that's where it's hard to know your own mind too sometimes. Like it's particularly when you're trying things for the first time maybe as well. Like that girl who goes to have sex with the porno actor. It's like it's the first time she's ever done that and she's not entirely sure if she wants to do it or not. And I kind of liked that he was respectful and was like, oh, you make up your own mind. Yeah, so I've got some more quotes around that vulnerability because I think she kind of talks about how desire is inherently vulnerable. And the thing about a book is it's a great place to store vulnerability because you are safe. You are completely safe between the pages of a book. Would you agree?
Yeah. One of the quotes where she's talking about how fear is so wrapped up in sex and then how do you make it not scary? Let me try and find the quote.
Because even if it's not a fear of violence, there's the fear of rejection, a fear of
yeah.
doing it
being
badly
laughed at.
Like, yeah.
Do you know, like, and I know people talk, like men are always talking about women might laugh at them, but women are afraid of that too. Other people, anyone in a body is afraid of being abject, repulsive, ridiculous, unattractive. Like there are all these things, not good enough, inadequate, like it's a very vulnerable thing.
Katherine Angel also talks about how a woman's desire exonerates a man often, desire and arousal. So there's also the fear of that, I guess, as well. Like in a courtroom, if there is desire present, then a man who has raped a woman is exonerated. Yeah, because she wanted it.
It all hinges on her. Why is that? Why?
Because men always want it. So if there's a no in there, it has to be a woman.
Yes.
Well, that's not the reason. But
That's really sad, isn't it? That the reductiveness of that is actually really sad.
Yeah. There's not enough exploration, I think, of maybe men's sexuality? Like, it seems like in all of this, there's a lot of interrogation of how women negotiate sex and what women's desire is. We don't really know. One of the things we were saying off camera when we were talking about dark romance and dark taboo kinds of sexual fantasies, we were thinking about the writership of those and how it seems to be, we could be wrong, but it seems to be women primarily writing these things. Is there any reason why men can't be writing about their deepest desires? Like, what are they desiring? What do we know about men's desires?
I also feel like there's a level which they're not societally conditioned to actually think about what their desires are. They're told what their desires
Their
are.
emotions too. I think all of it, all of their inner world.
Like talking about how people perceive it on like the case of like an assault case. I always find it really disturbing the way people talk about assault cases where it's an older woman who has been abusing a younger, usually a teenage boy. And you'll see people commenting like, oh, lucky guy. And it's like, it's not lucky, it's abuse and assault.
Abuse.
Like why does this become a joke to you in that specific way? It's not even that like when it's women or teenage girls, it's like, oh, she was asking for it, etc. There's those narratives. But the same, but in a different way is applied to teenage boys of like, oh, well, they should just be happy. That
they cannot be victims, right? Like it's when you get sexual abuse of a man with a younger boy, there's such a societal horror because men shouldn't be victims, right? That's the thing. It's like the vulnerability. Men can't be vulnerable.
Yeah.
There was that famous case, I think it was earlier this year or maybe even late last year, of a teacher with a teenage student, a boy, and as part of the trial, heaps of their text messages were leaked. And you can see people are really focused on the fact of him giving her so much attitude in these text messages and making so many demands. And it's as if they're implying that he had some sort of power in that situation. But he's going through a trauma and he's trying to process that trauma. It doesn't really matter how he's behaving. It just should not be happening to him, maybe.
And there's the expectation that you have to play the perfect victim, but what does that even look like?
Yeah.
What's that really famous case that they turned into a movie with Natalie Portman? Is it Natalie Portman?
Oh,
She ended up marrying the young boy.
Yes.
And they have children.
Oh, I know the one you mean. Yeah, Mary Kayla Tourneau. That one?
Does that look? Yes.
I think it's that one.
It was a movie
in the
last year, the
US.
year before, and
horrifying.
horrifying.
So bad. And people were revisiting the documentary as well. And she just cannot process when the interviewer is telling her what she did. There's just nothing, like no understanding of how she violated her power in that situation. But I found the quote about fear, and Katherine Angel was talking about a particular book called In the Cut, which is a thriller. And Susanna Moore, that one. And there's a lot of sex with a suspect in a murder, I believe, from memory. But what she writes about it is, In the Cut is deeply, achingly erotic, not in spite, but because of its acknowledgement that violence hovers all around. Sex, if we are lucky, is not just exciting and satisfying. It also touches on our deepest fears, our deepest pains. And yet, how not to scare ourselves. And I feel like romance as a genre provides a bit of that safety net and avoids making you scare yourself too much when you're reading about fearful sex, like fear-drenched sex, because you can put the book down. And because usually dark romance might experiment with the genre quite a bit, but typically things are resolved by the end.
Also, there's an element of, even in the darker ones I've read, an element of care. There's some kind of glimmer of care that you're not just an object.
Like he's very stabby and killy with everyone else except for her. He's soft for her.
Well, he might.
That's why he abuses her.
Abby's like, no.
I
don't read these books.
Ask, like in our conversations around consent, etc., like how much kind of, say we're talking heterosexual, how much a woman's upbringing in a specific culture impacts
100%.
What she is consenting to and what she believes is fine. Because I think about strangulation a lot in my research because it happens on the page often, called choking in sex. But I can only view it as strangulation per Kate Manne's conversation of it.
Yeah, which is very convincing. I think if anyone wants to look up Kate Manne on Instagram, she's been posting a lot lately.
Yes, she has a Substack that I subscribe to for a month, and it's amazing. I wish I could afford to always be subscribed to it. But if you can't, then Down Girl talks about it in the first chapter called Smothering.
Yeah.
But yeah, the idea that strangulation just is inherently dangerous and therefore it shouldn't be done. And I understand that the romance book is a fantasy space like we've spoken about, but then we also do learn our sexual scripts from somewhere.
I know. I do worry about cultural grooming. I do. I really think, because there's an element of, yes, we're adults and their fantasies, but then there's an element of when it becomes mainstream and normalized. And choking nowadays is presented as something that is like just part of sex. It's
When
just
I was in
casual.
high
Vanilla
school,
now.
it was vanilla. Yeah.
Yeah, and see,
that
that
was
is
like
not okay,
over
because
10
it
years
does
ago.
cause
So
immense
even now
harm
it's
and can lead to aneurysms and can lead to strokes and can and
mean, you
you
could
don't
die,
see it.
and
You can
people do.
die. They die even if it happens to you once.
You can die days later.
Yeah. It causes brain damage, and so like I'm personally not okay with it. But also you don't see it, like Kate Manne points out, you very rarely see it going the other way. The women are not strangling the men in these fantasies.
Yeah.
It is about the male strangling the female. And so
it's
what are we teaching ourselves,
it's
people?
inherently linked to violence and male power. Then.
Yeah. Whereas I feel like with BDSM and other things, you do see it go both ways.
And romance books that are specifically about BDSM relationships, where the characters themselves are knowingly, involved in a BDSM relationship, will have those conversations often on the page.
But also there's often not pain, like there might be S&M stuff, but there's not like the kind of pain and violence that might lead to death. Yeah. Like that's kind of a next level thing.
That's one of the things that people were really upset about with 50 Shades of Grey, which proclaims to be about BDSM, but there's no actual safety that is so entrenched in BDSM in that book. And so if people are learning about things inevitably from books that they read, and you think you're learning about kinky sex from a book because it's the first time you've encountered it and you're not reading about it anywhere else really, then you're learning the wrong thing and you're learning the dangerous thing. There's not much aftercare. There's, in those books, there's the crossing of boundaries that have been laid beforehand, all that kind of stuff.
Because I always see the argument that women know fact from fiction. Like they know
But to
when they're
girls,
reading.
I mean, because young
but to
girls read
girls.
them too.
Yeah.
Like I do think you do have a slight. I mean, again, like if it's a fringe thing, that's fine. But when it's in almost every
I've
dark
read-
romance now,
Yeah, I've read interviews of people who are active romantasy readers who say that it's impacting their sex lives. They talk about it in a positive way, that like it's improving their sex lives and they're talking more with their partners and they're implementing what they're seeing in romantasy into their sex lives.
Yeah.
And so then my brain goes, well, what I'm reading in romantasy is stuff like strangulation or more violent forms of sex. Without any of the conversation that's happening in like BDSM culture. So
'Cause there's a
what are
difference
we
between
learning?
play and actual violence.
Yeah.
I think.
I do think that it always exists on a spectrum. And sometimes it's like reflecting something that is like the books are reflecting scripts that exist in other places, and then it's like two mirrors pointed
because
at
it was
each other.
it's been in porn for 20 years,
Yeah.
choking.
Yeah.
But I do think that like I don't know. I'm always torn because on the one hand, I do agree with you that it's like
I'm
what
torn too.
what are
I just
people
want to clarify.
what are people
I'm also torn.
internalizing about sex when they're reading this? But on the other hand, I also just remember being a teenager and being really frustrated at conversations people would have about the types of content teenagers are reading, and I was like, I'm not stupid, but at the same time,
but at the same
you do
time,
internalize things that you don't even notice you're internalizing.
And at the same time, as you grow up and you get older and older and older, and you watch patterns roll through society, you see the same old shit. Like you see the same old misogynies come up, the same old internalizations of like you watch the rise of kind of anorexic culture come and go and come and go and come and go. And you're like, well, there's a point at which, maybe the stories we tell are actually really important. So I don't believe in censorship. I do think adults are pretty sensible. But also when a mass culture, when the vast amount of the culture is grooming us towards things that are harmful to us, maybe fuck off.
Yeah, but like you can't act like books are completely outside of the world.
Yeah. I think the problem is that we don't talk enough about sex with teenagers, and so they're only reading these books, and so they're not there's no like counteraction from
Particularly the extremists of sex, the fact that they are witnessing things like choking
Yeah.
as part of a normal thing on
and
porn.
not having a conversation about it
Yeah.
in your real life with anyone and learning.
So kids, that's going to be a fun dinner. You should talk
Yeah.
to my kids because we do this and they like, oh God, mum. Like seriously, like maybe it is traumatic having your parents talk about it, but I think you do kind of have to have
It's
those.
worth
We
it.
do the opposite in my house at the moment because I've been writing about sex and
They're like,
romance.
"Abby, stop
I'll start
talking about
ranting about like sex to my parents, and they're like,
I don't want to
hang on. Yeah, my dad doesn't ask me about my research anymore. He was like, first it was feminism and now it's sex. So he's really doesn't want to borrow it.
And you said, no, it's still feminism at the same time.
Yeah, no, now it's
Feminism and
both,
sex.
Dad.
Yeah, we're very anti-censorship, and I feel like books can be whatever you want them to be. It's all of the lack of attention outside of the book that we're paying to teenagers and their sexualities that is really causing the main problem.
I feel
And
like
when we're groomed to a sexuality that is about suppressing us,
Yes.
that is about making you lesser than and submissive to a dominant force that is actually going to make your life miserable, that's what makes me angry.
I think we're anti-censorship but pro having a think. Like,
yeah. There's our T-shirt, guys.
Anti-censorship pro having a thing.
I want to put the pro having a think on the back. Anti-censorship, pro having a think.
Because it's like, why shouldn't we be having these conversations and treating these books, thinking deeply about them? Like, it's
I believe you've said this to me before, Amy, where I can't remember what conversation we were having, but it was about how like
I don't know, because we can sub each other out at any point.
it was like I was talking about how a lot of the arguments for romance books is that, you know, we can do whatever we want with them, blah, blah, blah. But if we're not raising questions, you said, then there's no nuance. Like
None
if we're
at
not
all.
questioning what's
Yeah.
happening in these books,
I mean, it's not
there's no nuance
anarchy.
happening.
Like, I'm sure we can have anarchy if you want it. I know Payton might be into a bit of anarchy sometimes, but also like it's not suppression to talk about things.
No.
Like when people like to go, you know, don't yuck my yum, like don't kink shame, don't. It's like, well, maybe I'm not kink shaming, but I'm asking a question about it.
Yeah.
I have this issue with complete different thing, but this will help people understand, I think, the plastic surgery conversation. And any time you want to criticize plastic surgery, people go, it's none of your business. It's just something I want to do with my body and I like it. And so what if I think it
Sure,
makes me
so
look
maybe
better?
we're
kind
not
of
talking
creeps
about
into
you as an
choice
individual.
feminism.
Maybe we're talking about the mass cultural thing that's making women stick fake stuff in their bodies.
Yeah.
Like for power.
And clavicle. His hammocks and his bones.
Poor dude. Oh, Braden.
Oh, Braden, if that's your name.
Forever known as Braden to me now.
I've got a couple more points to make before we wrap up
What
today
is
because
his
Payton's got more excellent questions. And these are relating to our book of the month.
A lot of
Morning
this
Glory
can seep
book of
into
the
next week's, not next week's,
Yeah.
the last week of the
Week
month
of the
conversation.
book club.
Book club.
Book club. So does the silliness of monsterness in these kinds of novels negate the fear wrapped up in otherness? Like, are we substituting kind of male otherness for a monster? And then does making him a monster make it easy to navigate how other they are?
I love how I wrote the question.
Big question.
I'm like,
That was a big
I was just going to say,
Great
I've,
question, Amy.
I've fact checked and clavicular is Braden. So
Oh, okay. So we've
I am a
accurately been
medium.
bullying him. All right.
Ray, honey, read bell hooks.
I don't think he'll listen to
bell
that.
hooks.
Sorry.
can you please repeat the question?
It was does in monster romances does like taking the masculinity, making it more monstrous,
Does it negate the fear?
negate the fear? That's
Or does
exactly
it
what I was
mediate
gonna
the
say.
fear? Does it help with
Men
the
and
fear?
women are inherently, especially, you know, AFAB, AMAB, if you're inherently other to each other, and sex is really like a collision of that otherness, and that is, there's a lot of fear wrapped up in that, as we're saying. Making the other a monster kind of adds an element of silliness or saturation and obviousness that makes it more palatable in a way, or it's a place for you to
I
navigate
think it's
it.
not so different from the romantasy guys with wings as well. Like you
Yeah.
make them other.
There's also a level where maybe it's abstracting the masculinity away from the man or the men, and is that a layer of
That's
I guess
interesting.
safety in sort of your imaginative desire? I don't know.
One thing I was thinking about was the double-edged sword again there, though, because the otherness is also, I think we've talked about this before, is also removing the humanity from men. And it's very easy, like, if you talk about clavicular, like giving himself a name like that even is othering himself, right? And is like trying to mask vulnerability with this total patriarchal, I am so strong and invulnerable. And then when you make them a monster, I mean, I think it does ruin the kind of human meets human thing. So when we were talking about, you know, sex being like a conversation, like I just think we have to take men down off this stupid patriarchal pedestal and see them as another human being who's flawed and vulnerable and struggling with their own desire and really in the same systemic mess that we're in. And not that we should take responsibility for them, but it is interesting. The monster thing really ups the otherness we already feel about them.
Yeah. And then it's interesting to then think about, I know I was already speaking about Ice Planet Barbarians last week, but maybe because he's not just a monster, but he's an alien from a
monster.
different planet. He actually is.
Is he from
more
Mars?
vulnerable in a way. I was going to say.
Because here on Venus, I'm not sure about that guy.
You would think that a book like that would lean into the men are from Mars, women are from Venus thing. And yet what it kind of focuses more so on is that they are so different. They have no choice but to be vulnerable with each other to figure each other out.
Yeah.
Because
he's also vulnerable in this.
I do think that monstrousness.
Yeah, I have arguments about that, but we'll
we can.
I do think that monstrousness in books more generally, or media more generally, but in romance, takes on a different significance when you're looking at queer romance and queer characters.
Yeah.
Or even like characters of colour. We talked about this a little bit when we looked, when we read Feast While You Can, where like there's a level of like where the otherness is something that is feared, where the monstrousness is something that your character is having a relationship with the idea of them being a monster or being considered a monster. And so I think in queer romances, like loving a monster is part of like loving yourself and the ability to find that. So it's not always about like creating more of a separation. Sometimes it's about
a mirror,
almost the opposite. I don't know. Yeah,
that's good. That leads me into my closing quote from the book, actually, really nicely. So she says, sexuality is lived, learned, developed over time and in particular contexts. This is why sex means something to us. It's never a pure function, but always rich and burdened with significance. If we want to be joyful and fulfilling, it is on sex's context that we should focus our emancipatory energies. And I think that's interesting what you're saying about recognizing yourself and loving yourself. There's something about sex which shows all our vulnerabilities, and that's in conversation with other people but also with ourselves. Because I think often what we're talking about with guys like Braden is that they're not coming to sex to see us or to recognize us as human. They're in some kind of mirror battle with themselves.
They're just looking for dividends or something.
ROI. Yeah.
Stock options.
Found a worse metaphor than tea. Anyway.
It's not where you'll find them, buddy.
I feel like we could talk about this forever, which is why we had a second Smut Month.
Yeah. Anyway, we will do Smut Month every single year, I think, because we get so much out of it. Anyway, if anyone's interested in reading it, Katherine Angel's Tomorrow's Sex Will Be Good Again. It's not a very big book. It's like you'll rip through it, and every page you'll be like, oh, I've got to highlight that.
Oh, it's so good.
And then don't forget, for book club, we're doing CM Nascosta's Morning Glory Milking Farm.
Also so good.
Also so good.
Yes.
Even Abby liked it.
Even Abby liked it.
Which implies I've not liked any of our previous stuff, which is incorrect.
No, we just mean like if you look at Abby's podcast with Harry.
Don't. No.
There were a lot of books they did not
like. It's got to come down.
What we're saying is you're discerning. You're a very discerning reader.
Yes, yeah.
And you
I am a
wouldn't
picky reader.
You wouldn't necessarily think monster smut would be your thing.
No, particularly considering my research area. I just think the book itself is written really well.
Yeah.
So when I flip through those sex pages and ignore those, then but we'll get into
We're going to be talking about
club.
that in book club. So join us for book club. Happy Smut Month, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.
George
I
Eliot.
really want to make them read George Eliot.
Yes.
We could do a short one.
I can read George.
Yes.
Why not?
I just ordered Romola.
Have you
I don't know.
seen-
if
I'd
I'm
love to
saying
know
that
the
right.
Have
kind
you
of-
seen Middlemarch? It's like
It's huge.
It's
yeah.
about 1,000
I'm
pages.
reading The
or something.
Count of Monte Cristo right now.
Yeah,
Yes.
Do you actually have everyone?
Do you know?
who
Okay, do you guys want to hear why? This is funny. Can't go in the podcast.
Yes, it can.
We're putting it in.
My brother reached out and said, "There's someone at work who's reading books. Can you tell me a book that I could say that I've read that I could recommend that would be?" And my brother is like a very certain kind of person. I was like, he needs an uppity book. But I was like, I like the Count of Monte Cristo in theory, but I've never read it. And so I was like, this book. That's what you should say you've read.
And then you
And
were
then
like,
my brother,
oh my God.
and then my brother was like, "Oh, okay. What are your thoughts on it?" And so I gave him my thoughts on it.
And then you're like, now I should.
And then he went out and bought it and started reading it. And so he's like, every now and then he'll update on me and where he's at and what's going on. And so I was like, I need to read the Count. I was like, I had to pick the longest. Yes. So
He doesn't listen to the podcast. We can put this in.
yeah, I don't think he listens to podcasts, but yeah. So he
This
lied.
is a test to see if what's your brother's name?
Ben.
If
Ben
is
does not.
yeah.
He is not listening to this
Ben, if
podcast.
you're listening,
He might
send
see
us
if it
a
goes on
DM.
social media. But
He
yeah,
could
so
pick
he
any
lied to
of our-
someone, I lied to him, and then now we're all lying. But we're all reading Monte Cristo out of it, so
And that's how you get people reading.
yeah.
Oh,
I went,
that's
what's
so
a
nice.
snobbish book that I can pick? And it's actually it's very fun.
No, yeah,
It's
very,
so
it's
fun.
very like
Such a romp.
adventure fun.
Yeah.
yeah.
He keeps being like, it's so long, and I'm like, yeah, but it's so worth it by the end. Like once you've read
I
it,
love the
yeah.
ending.
Once you've read it, yeah. You're like, wow, I'm so glad I read that book.
And then you can be like, oh, so you just didn't get it.
Exactly.
I love that you could have picked a book that you have read. And you
I
just
know.
decided not to. I
Yeah.
don't know, like
How
you
many-
don't
Have you
read.
read a lot of classics?
I
though?
haven't read a lot of classics, no. And look, my brother, I love him. He's a very snobbish person in brain. Yeah.
Sorry, Ben.